Think of the last time you can remember having 32 different countries from around the world gather into one place, one nation, where they might have clashing cultures, clashing ideals, but they all go there for the same purpose of seeking glory. The glory comes through the World Cup, Soccer World Cup, and it's made up of 32 teams from around the world. It is basically the most popular sports tournament in all of the world, and it only comes around every 4 years, much like the Olympics. First off, the World Cup, at least the men's, got its beginning through the restrictions placed on it through the Olympics around the 1920s, even after the Olympics, eventually leading to the Olympics cutting them off completely. Some of these restrictions were players of certain ages weren't permitted to go to the Olympics, so it kind of dwindled on the experience of who was naturally the best team in the world for the sport, leading for the creation of the World Cup. It was kind of a rough start. It only started off with 13 teams from around the world. It was very small compared to nowadays, less than half, and it just wasn't the same. It wouldn't have been the same if we watched that today. The women's started off almost 60 years later in 1991 with only 12 teams, one less than when the men started. The winner of the first World Cup for the women's was USA, and it was held in China. And as for the men, it was Uruguay, and it was also held in Uruguay. However, the beginning of the World Cup since it did start in 1930, the most significant historical event throughout that time was World War II, right around the corner. And as soon as World War II rolled around, the competition got cut for 10 years, roughly, of no playing, and it did not resume. They didn't have another World Cup until 1950. Almost a decade without any of the competition heard of. How it works is actually pretty simple if you think about it. If you just take time to understand it. It basically is 32 different teams thrown into a competition, groups of 4, and 2 teams from every group, 8 groups of 4. Top 2 teams from every group move on to the knockout stage. And the way you qualify for these groups is your nation is split into different confederations, is what they call them. And as for an example, Mexico, USA, Latin American countries, Canada, they're all in the same confederation called CONCACAF. They need to be the top 4 teams from each confederation can go to the World Cup. And basically, that's actually why US missed out. They didn't manage to qualify for the World Cup. It was actually very shocking to the world. But yeah, there's all these confederations around the world. There's 8 in total, and from the 8, 4 teams are picked from each one, which form the 32 teams, which are then drawn. They do a draw to see which team is in what group. Host nations are actually decided by a board of FIFA panels. A panel of FIFA board members. How they decided is travel accommodations, stadiums, if the stadiums are big enough to hold all the people for the competition. And obviously it brings a lot of money into the nation they choose, which has led recent years at least to see major corruption in this issue. For many people believe that it's actually been proven how board members have been bribed to vote on certain nations. For instance, 2018 World Cup Russia, it was recently discovered that Russia had bribed certain board members to vote for Russia. And for 2022 World Cup, it was also seen that Qatar, this one was probably the most obvious to everyone, they even had to change the dates from summertime to November to host the World Cup due to the summer heat. Next up, we have the World Cup in today's atmosphere, obviously with the corruption, but there's much more to it than just that. It's obviously progressed into something crazy. So much technology has been introduced into this competition that people were so against. And about 10 years ago, they introduced what it was called goal line technology, where if the ball passed the goal into the goal, rather than having the refs keep an eye on it to see if it would pass and have man error, they put technology to see if a sensor would sense if the ball passed and see where it would pass to count the goal or not. But most recently, and the most famous one, is called VAR, stands for Video Assistant Refereeing. And it basically has 3 more referees in a booth looking at cameras, and any controversial decision such as a penalty, they can review it, phone in the referee, and have the referee take a look for himself through a monitor that's on the pitch. And there's been a lot of controversy over this because people believe that when a goal is scored that might be offside or not, it then goes into review and then it stops the game and it's paused for a while. And mind you, this is a sport that's constantly moving. There's no timeouts. The only time you can sub players is when the ball goes out of bounds, and the only break is at half. So people aren't used to having the flow of the game disrupted because of technology. So not everyone was on board with this. And the World Cup is every 4 years. It's actually beneficial in a way that they wait so long for. It gives countries a little more organization with the qualifiers, and also gives the host nation, whoever it may be, time to accommodate themselves in terms of stadiums and just in general get ready for the event, just because it's so massive and they have to make sure everything's in place and everything's perfect for the event. And as for how popular it is, it's actually the most watched sports event whenever it's on. I have a graph right here. It shows you, this graph takes in the total number of viewers throughout the tournament, and it shows you what the US viewers are in red and what the total around the world in blue. But the tournament has recently, in the last 2 World Cups, reached billions of views, billions, throughout the whole tournament. As for the final doesn't see that many views per se, but it does reach 700 million. In 2014 final, it reached 700 million views, compared to what came second to it was the NFL Super Bowl, which was only around roughly 100 million views. It didn't come very close, but still, it's to just show how massive of an event this is around the world. All in all, also not to mention, there's been so many crazy things that happened throughout this whole cup, with players headbutting each other, and just so much excitement, so much love, so much peace around the world. Everyone loves it. Everyone waits for it. Even if you don't watch it, I know for a fact people who don't watch it, when their country's in it, they want to go out and they want to go support. That's just the effect it has on people, because everyone wants to support their country and make sure they can make it. And thank you. That's my speech.